Blackfella, Whitefella, Warumpi Band. There comes a time in one's life when no matter how lucky people tell you you are to do what you do, and no matter how grateful you are to be in this position, you just have to try something else. This happened to me after my second album. I'd toured and toured on a clear night across Australia and America for a good couple of years. I even moved to America to really commit myself to it. By the end, I was wrung out. I'd been away from home for so long that I'd lost contact with all my friends. I'd missed family weddings and birthdays and began to feel like I didn't really belong anywhere. Rootless, I guess you could say. Of course, this fed into my songwriting, or lack of songwriting. I hadn't written a song in over a year and a half, and inspiration felt like it was light years away from knocking on my door. Without songwriting or creativity, my blood had stopped flowing and dried up. There was a stagnancy inside me, and I didn't know who I was anymore. The thing that should be making me happy simply wasn't. To cut a long story short, I quit. I sat my manager down and told him I couldn't see a point in my future where music was making me happy again, and that I wanted to try something else with my life, something that felt more meaningful and could really make a difference in the world. I also wanted to prove to myself that music wasn't the only thing that defined me. This was a sad time for me, because until then music had been the only thing I knew I loved, the only thing I really felt comfortable with, like my oldest friend. But I felt I had no choice. It simply wasn't inside me, and at that point I'd spent years trying to conjure up new inspiration to no avail. So eventually I threw in the towel and chose happiness, or at least a pathway that I hoped would lead to happiness. The next step was to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. Nothing came to mind immediately. I racked my brain as to what kind of job I might want. Music therapy, environmental protection, refugee assimilation, but none of it felt quite right. In fact, I wasn't sure if I was even capable of having a normal job. Having been in the music industry my entire adult life, I felt extremely lacking in any other skills. So I thought perhaps I'll study. Perhaps I'll just learn about something I'm really interested in. Something I felt had been a missing part of my education as a child. Australian Indigenous Studies. About 8 years ago, Broome in Western Australia became a kind of second home to me. And since then, I've been lucky enough to be a part of a community that enjoys a pretty even mixture of Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. This had never been the case for me before. Growing up in Melbourne, I hardly saw any Aboriginal people at all. Broome's an unusual mix of cultural heritages also because of its pearl diving history. There's a significant proportion of Japanese, Malaysian and Chinese, as well as all the different Aboriginal nations that have ended up there over the years. So a lot of old Broome families have a particularly exotic look that's different from anywhere in the world, because it's a mixture of each of these ethnicities. Throw Irish and Scottish in there too. I love it, and I love the people of Broome. They're a special bunch and it's a special place. However, over the years, I've seen a lot of struggle in the outer communities of Broome. In Melbourne, I wasn't being directly exposed to the difficulties of Aboriginal Australian life, so that made it easy not to think about. Broome and the communities of the surrounding Kimberley area was another story. I also think the reason why I wanted to give Indigenous studies a try was because, like a lot of white Australians, I felt a terrible guilt about our not so distant past, but had no clue what to do about it. I also felt that I didn't really know much about Indigenous culture, and that was ridiculous considering we're ultimately living in their country. So I enrolled at Melbourne University. This was a huge, terrifying, but kind of exciting leap for me, because I signed to a record label before I'd finished high school, so I'd never been to uni. I felt it was a rite of passage that I'd missed out on. I used to fantasize about all the messy uni parties, sharing a huge rundown house with 10 schoolmates, staying up late, drinking black coffee, writing poetry and arguing passionately about philosophy, feminism and the current geopolitical climate. The reality as a mature age student, of course, was much different. I was the oldest in my class by about 6 years, and I was too shy to make friends anyway. I did, however, join a share house with my friends in Northcote and ride my bike to school every day, which was also part of the fantasy. So I was half living the dream. The course was interesting, but to tell you the truth, I didn't really find it life-changing. Embarrassingly, given the important subject matter, I actually found it extremely hard not to fall asleep in the lectures. I'd never responded well to sitting passively while being talked at. I loved the tutorials though. That was where we paired off in big groups each week, one of us leading the class. This was my favourite part because we discussed things like Indigenous land rights, healthcare, government handouts, the Northern Territory intervention, basically having conversations about things that mattered, and brainstorming as to what could be done about it. After a while, however, it felt a bit removed, like there was something fundamentally not right about a bunch of white kids sitting in a classroom talking about Indigenous rights, but not out there in the real world talking to Indigenous people about it themselves. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I'm glad I did it. If I wanted a career in that field, I would certainly have pursued it. But I was happy to finish the course and get back to the real world, talking to my friends in Broome about these issues, as opposed to theorising about them in a Melbourne classroom. I'm still passionate about the rights of Indigenous Australians and hope that one day we can all get to a place of real reconciliation and harmony with each other. We're headed slowly in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. So when I heard Blackfella, Whitefella, I thought it would be so great for this album. The perfect example of black and white coming together in literal and metaphorical harmony. It has also, to my knowledge, never been sung by two females, so I thought that would be very cool. Before I started, I wanted to contact someone from Warumpi Band to see how they felt about me singing it, what with me being white and female and all. I managed to get in contact with Sammy Butcher, one of the guitarists and founding members, who said he was happy for me to cover the song, but would ideally like a direct descendant of Warumpi Band to sing it with me. It was my plan, incidentally, to find an Indigenous Australian singer to duet with me. Seeing as though it's a song about reconciliation, I thought it would be weird not to. But someone related to Warumpi Band sounded even better. Sammy suggested his young niece, Crystal Butcher, who was currently living in Alice Springs but had studied jazz at the Victorian College of Arts and who apparently had a voice as warm as melted chocolate. Naturally, I was slightly apprehensive about flying someone over to sing on the album who I'd never met or heard before, but I decided to take a chance. As soon as Crystal sang the first note into the microphone after she arrived at the studio in Melbourne, we all breathed a sigh of relief. They were right, her voice was exquisite, and she sang the hell out of this song. You really couldn't get a more different voice from mine. I've never felt more chalky white than I did singing with Crystal's rich, sultry voice. But that was, after all, the whole point of this venture, harmonising two completely different worlds. Finding that sweet spot where you both fit comfortably alongside each other and creating something far more beautiful than you could have done alone. And to finish off the story about me quitting music in order to pursue something else, well, it seems like a bit of a joke now. It's a classic story of having to trek around the globe only to find that what you're looking for was in your pocket all along. I wanted to make a difference in the world by doing something less self-involved, something outside of myself and my own incessant navel-gazing. But what I failed to see was that music was the medium I was given. I didn't have a choice. In fact, perhaps I'd already made a bit of a difference to some people's lives just by telling my stories and keeping them company. Sometimes the thing that saves our life is a song, one that makes us feel like we're not so alone. I certainly know that feeling. Growing up, there were certain albums that felt like a lifeline to me. So yeah, I eventually made my way back to music and to songwriting, and now I have a completely different perspective on it. I love it again as much as I used to, but now with more gratitude and less shame attached. Being able to sing songs like Blackfella, Whitefella with people like Crystal Butcher and what that song represents speaks volumes louder to me than anything I could have done by spending years studying in a classroom. I wasn't going to be a scholar or an office worker or, Lord help me, a public speaker. That just ain't me, despite what I wanted to think. Sometimes I suppose you've just got to accept that you're good or not good at something for a reason. And there are endless ways to make a difference, even if it's just by doing what you love. The recording of this song isn't intended to be a huge statement or a call to arms. It simply is what it is. A song about hope and of bridging a divide. All you can do is put these things out there and hope that it adds another tiny ripple to the water, and that eventually all those ripples might turn into a wave. So if being another storyteller is all that I remain, well, that's actually fine.